Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to my top 10 creatures of survival games. I put out a community poll for you guys, you filled them in, and now I'm going to give you the rundown as well as my own opinion on what I think is the best ultimate creatures or mobs in a survival game. There's lots of choices out there. There are some fantastic creatures that have come out of games like Ark, Minecraft, Terraria, as well as a bunch of others, and I'm going to list the top 10 for you today. So do make sure you check out the future polls. We're covering the best story in survival games, the best maps, and a lot more, and let's go with your voted top 10 creatures in survival. Number 10 was Green Hell. Set in the Amazonian jungles, you'll encounter a plethora of different style creatures, all quite regular based though. Scorpions, snakes, panthers, jaguars, caplacobras, as well as a bunch of spiders, insects and birds. I wouldn't say the AI in this game is amazing, and I don't necessarily think the models are the best I've seen in a game like this, but they certainly do make for a scary experience as you're going through the jungles at night time, either getting chomped on by some of the crocodiles or eaten alive by leeches. It certainly has more unique mechanics. It also has the indigenous people. Now they're dangerous in the first parts of the game, but with free DLC added to PC, the Spirits of Amazonia, as well as coming to console in the future, they've made them a bit more friendly and you get to interact with them on a little bit more kinder note. They're not as frequent as attacks you might find in later games like Ark Survival Evolved, but they definitely have their merits, and it all adds to the experience of Green Hell being one of the toughest survival games you will play. Number 9 is Terraria. This has got one of the biggest choice and selections of creatures. With the latest update coming to consoles, Journey's End, in fact one of the last, it adds 400 brand new items, new bosses, new mobs and all sorts more. Terraria has always been a big choice and selection, but a lot of the creatures you don't actually get to encounter until you've unlocked the hard mode. By defeating the Wall of Flesh, one of the bosses in the game, you then unlock a variety of different harder creatures that will come and attack you. Add to the fact that you've got to survive during the night against mobs of zombies, as well as special events like the Blood Moon, where you'll get literally 20 or 30 creatures come to attack you at once. It's definitely no joke. The latest Journey's End update also adds the Beastry, which means you get to keep track of the creatures and learn more about them and discover what weaknesses and damage types they do. For sure, when it comes to doing the best bosses in survival, Terraria should be much higher placed as it's got some of the more unique battles. But certainly the common everyday mobs and creatures you'll find are definitely special. Don't discount it because it's 2D, it's got a lot going for it, and the creatures here can absolutely be a challenge. Putting the game on its most difficult setting will absolutely be a huge undertaking, even tackling the most common zombies and creatures. The art style is colourful yet horrific as well, mixing Cthulhu inspired features. Absolutely one of the more creative uses of creatures and one of the biggest choice and selections you'll find in any game, let alone survival. Add to that, you can create your own zoo full of critters, and there's even pets that you can take with you, and it's definitely got some of the best mobs. Number 7 of course is the granddaddy of all survival games, Minecraft. I don't think any other game can sit there seriously and say it hasn't taken some sort of inspiration from Minecraft. Sure, the mobs and creatures in this game maybe don't look as good as they once did or as revolutionary. Nowadays pretty much every game's got better looking mobs, but Minecraft did start it all. And while they haven't maybe added as many as people would like over the years, they still are adding a few, with each yearly update, the latest being the axolotl and more goats coming in the Caves and Cliffs update. What I really loved about Minecraft back in the day was that killing certain creatures gave you certain resources that you needed to progress, and that has carried on in most of the survival genre ever forward. And while some creatures like the skeletons aren't exactly that unique, I don't think there's ever been a creature as weird as a creeper, something that actually blows up and kills itself just as it's about to attack you. You can also use pets, ride horses and a bunch more, and yeah, it's definitely an art style that hasn't maybe aged as well as other games, but without Minecraft I'm absolutely guaranteeing most of the survival games wouldn't be existing today. I was pretty surprised to see State of Decay make it to number 7. It has got some great choices in zombies, but I wouldn't say it's the most original take I've seen on the zombie genre with their creatures. Nevertheless, the art style of them has captured your imagination, and maybe it's the AI of them, the way they swarm around, and different unique abilities of them. They've also got some great animations in the game for taking out some of the larger creatures too, and the choice of weaponry, the quick action kill cams are great as well. I personally would have ranked something like Days Gone a little bit higher in terms of zombie action, purely because of the way they swarm around you, but clearly you guys have really enjoyed the art style and the AI and how it works in State of Decay. It is pretty scary with them red eyes glowing at you whenever you run through the dark, and you certainly don't want to be caught out after hours. Maybe it's just the way they explode when you run them over with your car, or the way you can jump on them and knife them in the head. Do let me know why you love the creatures in State of Decay so much. One thing these polls have taught me is that some of you guys have not played enough of the rest of the survival games out there, and maybe not your fault because Grounded is an Xbox exclusive, but if you do get a chance you can try it on PC and maybe even on the Xbox Cloud, so maybe see if you can play it on your phone. But this offers a great survival experience and the creatures make up a bunch of that experience. They're so unique, the art style is great on them, and they've got some of the best animations and attacks that I have seen in any survival game. From the tiny little aphid that you'll find creeping around the grass stalks, which you can knock over and then go ahead and cook them and eat them, to whole armies and colonies of ants that will come to each other's rescue and are pretty much there for you to kill them, so you get bits and bobs to craft new weapons and armours. There are some genuinely scary moments in the game when you go into some of the anthills or the spider nests in the dark. And since the year it's been in early access, Grounded has revamped the creatures a lot, adding much more better AI to them, and so they really are some of the smartest creatures in the survival world. When it comes to my personal choice, you're going to see Grounded up there a lot higher than what you guys voted for in number 6. There's definitely something about taking on bugs from the backyards that I think not many other games have managed to capture right. Probably Ark is the closest when it comes to creepy crawlies that you possibly could face, and spiders. In fact, the spiders are done so well, Obsidian had to make a dough mode where you can make the spiders into little orbs just in case you've got arachnophobia. The sounds of them, the way they move, I think some of the best creature designs and AI is definitely in Grounded right now. You definitely don't want to get caught between a hard place and one of these bad guys. Into the top 5 now with Conan Exiles at 10% of the vote. A real mix and blend of real world creatures and fantasy based ones, Conan Exiles does have a certain charm with some of them. Of course, it's not just the wildlife that makes Conan's AI and creatures special, it is the thralls, the slaves that you're meant to pretty much capture and use for your bidding. Some would argue they may be a bit overly sexualized, and I think if you were to release Conan now, there may be more of a backlash against some of the looks of them. I did famously introduce the slider that can make your dong bigger or smaller. But my woke politics aside, there is a great choice and selection, and you do get more fantastical creatures like these rock noses in and around the world, and there's a whole plethora of giant to mid-size mini bosses too. I would say the AI in Conan's probably its weakest point though. They do have some unique animations, some of them, and definitely towards the end of Conan's development stage, where more of the newer creatures were added, you can see the difference between the models looking more realistic and more lifelike the way they move. It's also still got some of the classic survival tropes like the skeleton men, and if you're not a big fan of snakes, then you may not want to venture too far into the Forbidden City in Conan Exiles. It's a real mixed bag in terms of what the creatures are doing at any given point. Some of them just remain static and motionless till you get really super close, and then their AI is laughably that you can run away from most of the creatures and enemies in the game. But if you ever run around in ghost mode like I am and take a good look at some of the others, and you do find sometimes they go to battle and war with each other, and this can definitely be something to have a little bit of a laugh with and see which one could potentially win, the saber-tooth or the wolf. But clearly it's resonated with enough of you to make it into the top 5, and it sits there proudly, like I said, with 10% of the vote. So many of the games that are listed in this top 10 have good choices of creatures, a good selection of monsters you come across, and that means that you kind of resonate with that maybe a little bit more. It's the Pokemon in you that you want to capture and gather a lot of them when you can have them as pets, but there are some games where the creatures truly are terrifying, and the amount of them isn't as big as you'd think, but it's the moments that you come across them that really set the game apart from others. Venturing into one of the caves for the first time is scary as F. It's honestly my scariest game I can play in the survival world, hence why I've never actually fully completed it. I had to watch the end trailer because I just couldn't take all the crying mutants anymore. And these are just the starter monsters. There's a whole bunch of mutated, warped, horrible creatures that I don't think I really want to show, just in case you're a bit younger or a bit of a crybaby like me. If you get knocked out the first few times in the forest, you get taken back to one of the caves and hung up, and you have to escape, hopefully with the aid of some weapons that you might find lying around. It's truly a scary affair. Definitely one of the scariest survival games going. The creatures look great, the way that they appear, they patrol around the island looking for you at times. There's no real way to predict where they're going unless you are absolute pro at this game, and I've spent hundreds of hours in it. Adding to the terror is the fact that they'll come and attack your bases on pretty much regular timing, so you have to make sure you're defending and protecting against all sorts of crazy encounters with them, and they're intelligent too. They look and probe for your weakest spot in your defences. 11% of you voted the forest as some of the best creatures and AI in the game, and I definitely feel that should have been higher. Moving swiftly on to 14% of the vote, 7 Days to Die. I'm guessing you guys don't necessarily mind the fact that some of the models look a bit ropey, especially on console where the game hasn't been updated in years, and definitely on PC you've probably enjoyed the revamps that a lot of the creatures have had, and which are still going to be incoming in the latest Alpha 20 update. And maybe it's your love of the fact that the AI is pretty smart in terms of where it's going to attack your base. With every 7 days, of course, the zombies attacking you in giant hordes, and preparing and making sure you got the right defences is really the main aim of the game. So it's got to be one of the most important features, and I'm guessing that's why so many of you have voted this as number 3. When it comes though to the models themselves and just the regular AI of every zombie you meet, they're pretty bog standard and maybe directly lifted off from a lot of other previous games like Left 4 Dead. For sure though, were you surviving in the dark, running around looking for some resources or a safe place to make base, definitely some of these zombies creeping up behind you is not an experience you want to have on a regular basis. That's why you need plenty of light and making sure you only venture out in the day. And unlike most zombie movies where the zombies can't climb, 7 Days to Die bucks that trend. You're never safe. At number 2 with 15% of the vote, very tight, close to the other games. Of course it is though Subnautica, a huge selection of different style creatures. So many of them are so friendly they wouldn't think twice about jump scaring you. No, of course not. Until you go a bit further, a little bit deeper into the waters, until you come across one of these bad boys. If there's any scarier more moment when a Reaper Leviathan comes out of the depths, takes you in its clutches, and FYI, it's not going to sing you to sleep. This is one of the scariest creatures you'll find. The screams, the noises it makes as it approaches, absolutely puts it up there, and Subnautica definitely deserves to be in the top 2. There's a few other creatures like this one and its sequel Below Zero, and absolutely deserve its place. The AI in it is pretty cool. It runs around doing its own thing, but it seems a bit more sentient and reactionary to you, whereas sometimes the AI does seem a bit derpy with some of the smaller creatures. Some of the creatures in Subnautica also suffer from that dead eye syndrome that you're going to see a lot in the next game that took the number 1 spot. You've got great animations, great effects, great abilities, some creatures in these games, but there's just something about the eyes. Reefback whales that have huge inlets of air to take and suck in its nutrients as it glides through the water, to schools of little fish that you can catch and cook, hopefully. Subnautica does offer one of the biggest and best blends of scary and cute, colourful creatures that all serve a good purpose, that can generally give you a fright or sometimes are just something pretty to look at. I think it would have been cool to utilise some of the creatures you come across more, like use them to actually traverse the environment a little bit. Maybe that's something they can think about if they ever get around to making Subnautica free. Although I'm definitely going to think twice before jumping on the back of this guy. And so here we are, nearly number 1. Just a quick shout out though to the games that maybe could have made this list. I did 3 polls and then I took the best results of them 3 polls and put them in a final poll. But some great shout outs here for Don't Starve. It's got a huge choice of different style creatures. There could have been an argument for No Man's Sky to be included with its weird collection of procedurally generated creatures. And I'm sure there's valid shouts out there for other games like Atlas, Days Gone like I mentioned, and maybe some of your other zombie simulators that you guys suggested. But what really makes a difference for me is the creatures being either scary, persistent or unique, and that's what I really like to see in survival. It's why I love the genre so much. It's why I rate it highly above other RPGs or open world games, because that dynamicness, that way that creatures can turn on each other and then turn on you, and you never know what's around the corner if it's a good survival game. And that's what so many of these games in this list offer. They may not always be the prettiest, they may not always be the smartest, but at times they will jump out and scare the crap out of you. We definitely have room to improve in the AI, but I think games like The Forest have shown that you can make really smart, intelligent creatures, and it sounds like Sons of the Forest, the sequel to The Forest, is going to push that boundary even further. So let's get on with it though. Which is number one? By now you should have probably guessed. Of course it's Ark Survival Evolved. Whopping 50% of the vote. Absolutely, it's got the largest choice of creatures you'll come across in any survival game. And most of them are indeed dinosaurs. Ark Survival Evolved doesn't have the most intelligent of creatures at times, the way the patterns they attack, but it more than makes up for this in the sheer number and the customization of each and every single one. You've got over 250 unique creatures in the game, more if you include all of the DLC, and each one of these creatures can be dyed or found in different unique colours. It really sets it out above and beyond every other survival game. They can be incredibly derpy looking at times too, especially some of their animations and the way they interact with their environments. Sometimes you come across scenes that look like something out of Jurassic World. The way they're attacking some of the herbivores, the carnivores are deadly, and definitely with their abilities, unique groupings at times, it's a real challenge surviving in, of course, Ark. With each brand new DLC, they've pushed the boundaries of what you'd expect in a dinosaur-led game, with fantasy creatures and mutated ones. Who can forget the first time you tried to get a wyvern egg in Scorched Earth DLC? We had even more colour and more mutations added in Aberration, with a variety of different bugs and cave-dwelling creatures. And where Ark really shines is making sure that every unique biome has some sort of danger, with lots of underwater creatures as well, like this gigantic massive crab. Some of these creatures do offer more than just a chance to get some new dino meat. Some will offer you resources that you can only get from catching them, or maybe they'll be catching you in their claws. There's just such a rich diversity. You have to tame them in different ways, and I guess that really puts Ark above so many of the others. There is some creature riding in Conan, there is some creature riding in No Man's Sky, but Ark has taken that to a huge another level. I'm one of Ark Survival Evolved's biggest critics, but I could never criticise the sheer amount and greatness of their creatures. Each new DLC offering a brand new chance to have the best upstanding meta, or sinking hundreds of hours in breeding to get the right kind of coloured mutations that you want for your dinosaurs, not forgetting also the bionic choices that you can find. There's a big contingent of fans that really just prefer the traditional dinosaur approach that was led through the first game, but I have come to appreciate the more fantastical and the more weirder ones in the later DLCs. You will never forget the first time you're pounced on by a raptor or munched by a T-Rex. And I can't wait to see what they got up their sleeves for Ark Survival Evolved 2. The Griffin is one of my favourites, but I want you guys to tell me which is yours. It doesn't have to be Ark. Tell me what mob you've had the most trouble with, what was the most terrifying, or what was the cutest that you found in one of the survival games I've mentioned today, or maybe I didn't come across one of the games that you absolutely love. As always, leave it in the comment section and look out for the next top 10. What do you want it to be? Story, bosses, maps? You guys decide, give me some ideas, and maybe it'll be the next one you see next week or two. Until next time, ratbags, laters.